All right, well, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, good afternoon.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our next coffee break webinar entitled Program Evaluation and Practice, a case study of Central State University STEM Success Center. If your part of the world is like my part of the world, hopefully you really have a nice hot cup of coffee with you to help you stay warm because it is cold outside. Before we jump in, let me go over a few housekeeping items. It's important that you have the opportunity to ask questions, so use the question function on your computer to be able to do that. And we have with us today our outreach coordinator who will be helping to moderate the Q&A as well as address any computer issues you may have. And let me introduce myself. I'm Lana Rux, Principal Consultant of the Rux Group. The Rux Group is a research and evaluation firm that gathers, analyzes, and interprets data to enable our clients to measure the impact of their work. We were formed in 2008, and over the past several years, we have worked with primarily higher education institutions and grants funded by federal agencies such as the National Science Foundation, Department of Education, and Department of Labor. If you participated in any of our previous webinars, you know that I often talk about how there are usually two broad motivations for evaluation. The first is proving, using evaluation to essentially check a box to say that it's done, and improving, which is focused on using evaluation for continuous improvement purposes. And it's my belief that proving or accountability purposes is usually nested within improving. So today builds on those concepts by discussing the continuous improvement cycle through an actual example. Specifically, we want to show how an evaluation finding was used by the project team. So I'm thrilled to have with us today Dr. Marikino Kuti of Central State University, who among many roles is the program director for the STEM Success Center. So let me turn things over to Dr. Kuti so that he can provide more information about his background, as well as information about the project that we will be discussing today. Dr. Kuti?
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Rox, and good afternoon to our listening audience. As Dr. Rox said, my name is Muraki Okuti. Not only do I work at Central, I'm a proud Centralian, or rather, class of 1985. I went away, got my master's and a PhD, and I came back. I've been working at Central State for 29 years. And although my full-time job is the director of the Office of Sponsored Programs and Research, I have great interest and passion in ensuring that our students succeed. So I work on several student success programs, one of which is the STEM Success Center, which I'll describe later on. But we also have scholarship programs. We have programs that also provide internships and other experiential learning opportunities for students. And the reason that I work at Central State and the reason that I work on Student Success Program is because I know the power of education to transform human life. As you may know, the single thing that can predict a person's future economic status is a bachelor's degree, regardless of race, age, nationality. Once you have a bachelor's degree, we can pretty much determine what your social economic status is going to be. So that's the background for this program and why we know that education is important. So next slide, please. So although I'm the one speaking today, I want to give credit that the STEM Success Center is a project funded by the U.S. Department of Education. It's funded under what is called the Minority Science Engineering Improvement Program. I am the project director. My co-project director is Dr. Ibrahim Katampe, and the STEM Success Center manager is Dr. Linda Thomas. She's actually the one that makes the train run on time and all that stuff. She talks to students and all that. The center is designed to improve the quality of underrepresented students, especially female, to make sure that they're ready when they graduate from Central State to either get a job or to go on to graduate school. We have three goals to help students succeed at Central State. One, which is what we're going to discuss in detail today, is to establish a comprehensive learning system for students, which means tutoring, academic support, in classroom, outside the classroom support, to address the deficiencies of STEM students taking specific STEM classes, which are called gatekeeper courses. In order to do that, we established a physical location for students to come and enjoy our services. But we'll talk more about that since because of COVID-19, we've had to change our plans drastically. And the other goal for our students for the program is to make sure students enjoy experiential learning opportunities, meaning they can play, they can see, put their hands on what they're doing, either through internships, uh, research opportunities, and other experiential learning opportunities where students can learn. So the goal of the program is to retain students, making sure they come back to school, persist, to make sure they continue to uh, onto their academic studies, and finally graduate.
All right. Well, great. Thank you very much. That really great background. So essentially, as I said, the purpose of the webinar is for us to demonstrate how evaluation can inform the continuous improvement process. So to do that, we'll share out first an evaluation finding, and then Dr. Kuti will show how that information was actually used. And then, of course, you'll have opportunities to be able to ask questions. So make sure to use that function. So let's go ahead and get started. For our first evaluation finding, let's look at how the STEM Success Center impacted on grades. And as Dr. Kuti noted, part of the STEM Success Services, part of the comprehensive learning services, is to provide tutoring. So to measure the impact of tutoring on grades, we were fortunate to have a natural experiment in which three different conditions emerged. First, we had students who participated in tutoring and received a stipend. Then we had students who participated in tutoring but did not receive a stipend. And then there were students who did not participate in tutoring at all. When looking at the findings, there were several kind of interesting trends that emerged, but I want to highlight two. The first is that in regards to withdrawals, students who participated in tutoring, whether they received a stipend or not, experienced a lower frequency of withdrawals than those who did not participate. And in a similar vein, that pattern emerged in terms of students who received Fs, such that those who participated in tutoring had a lower frequency of failing than those who did not. And then that was also intensified for students who received a stipend. And for students who were in that condition as well, they also received the highest frequency of of A's. What's also interesting to point out is that those who participated in tutoring and received a stipend participated in almost 5 times more tutoring sessions than those who participated but did not receive a stipend. So let me pause there and turn it back over to Dr. Kuti.
Thank you. So, how do we use the findings that Dr. Rox just explained? One thing that she said was, you notice that the people that receive the stipend, and let me explain what we mean by stipend. Mm-hmm. To get the stipend, you had to participate in a minimum number of sessions during the semester. And it was that you could only miss 2 tutoring sessions in the first half and 2 tutoring sessions in the second half of the semester. So the more you went to tutoring, the more benefits you got, and then you received a $100 stipend in the first half and $200 in the second half. So in other words, we were trying to incentivize students to come to tutoring. And as Dr. Rox just explained, tutoring was effective in that it increased students' performance. And the interesting thing was that once we got the findings from Dr. Rox and we showed the faculty members that your students that came to tutoring performed better, some faculty members made tutoring mandatory for their class. Some gave an incentive, financial incentive, some gave incentives in the form of grades. So when we showed the faculty members that those faculty members that made tutoring mandatory or gave significant incentives, the students performed better. We were able to encourage other faculty members to either make tutoring mandatory in their class or to give incentives as well. Next slide, please. One thing we also learned was that faculty engagement is the most critical factor in ensuring success. And what we mean by that is faculty that promote tutoring in their class, faculty that persuaded students through incentives or just through talking about tutoring in their class, and faculty that followed up with students and said, did you go to tutoring when I gave you an assignment? And if you did not do it well, did you go to tutoring? That will help your grade. So what we were able to do was convince faculty members that their participation beyond the financial incentives that we were paying was critical to student success. Next slide, please. So as you know, the purpose of the entire exercise is to ensure student success. One way, perhaps I don't know any other way, to measure student success is through grades. Are you getting an A, a B, or a C? And when students saw A, B's, and C's on their transcript, or that made them more likely to participate. So, and as we said earlier on, we want to retain students, make sure they come back. But we also, when they come back, we want to make sure they persist to the next stage. So, by students getting good grades, and by them coming back to school, it let them know that good grades would mean academic success throughout my stay at Central State University. Dr. Rox?
Very good. And not to kind of belabor a point, but it is just so very encouraging to see how you gleaned so much information out of those findings. So let me pause there for a minute and turn things over to Elise to see if there are any questions.
We do have a couple of questions. The first is, how did you communicate with faculty to share the findings? Did you make the ask for a particular action, or did they provide the actions as a solution?
So before COVID, you could go to people's offices. So we actually, once we got the findings from Dr. Rox, the project staff and I, Dr. Katampe and Ms. Shepard then, we met with, so we have two major departments that we're working with. We're working with the math department and we're working with the natural sciences. So we called a meeting with the faculty, with the chairs, sat around the table with the faculty members, and just like you could see the results of the findings today, we just showed it to them that these were your grades before tutoring, these are your grades with students that participated in tutoring, and these are the students' grades that did not participate. So that's how we persuaded them to understand the findings.
And I should also just add in something that I forgot to mention before too, is that those findings, that trend emerge over several terms. So it wasn't just, even though what was presented in this presentation was for one term, that trend emerged over several terms as well.
Thank you for that response. We do have one additional question.
Oh, okay.
How did you decide to recommend and then implement the action to increase courses based on the differences observed across the three groups? What informed whether the magnitude of the difference supports additional costs?
So as Dr. Rox explained, we gave stipends to students who had a minimum number of sessions, and were able to track students' grades based on their participation. So when we then went to the faculty members, we tied the grades to the participation. And we showed, so this did not happen, as Dr. Rock said, over a semester. So we had like 2 semester data. So we just laid the data of classes with heavy participation and stipends versus no participation and stipends. And I'm going to try and be generic as possible. So we went to one class, and the participation was like 80%. And we looked at the grades of that class in the prior semester, the distribution between A, B, C's, and D's. And then we went to another class and we showed them C. The other class, this was their participation before incentives and before tutoring. This is your class. And because you did not make tutoring mandatory or offer incentives, your grades remain the same. And faculty are also evaluated based on how they promote student success. So that's how we're able to convince faculty members about the importance of the project.
And I'm also thinking that this is probably a good segue for the next evaluation finding, which specifically talks about retention. And I think that when we finish with that portion, we should probably loop back to this question, because I think that that actually helps to address the issue about the cost. Because how does this impact on retention and some other items as well? So I'm going to actually just go ahead so that we can have time at the end to be able to tie that up in a bow. So as I said, the next finding that we wanted to be able to share was on the impact of the STEM Success Center on retention. And so to talk about the impact on retention, let me share out how we changed our conceptual frame for the analysis, like why we did it, and then also how we did it. So when talking about grades, you remember that there were 3 different kind of conditions that emerged. And what's also important to remember is that in thinking about students, because we were analyzing this at the level of the course, potentially a student could actually have experienced 3 different types of courses that would offer tutoring in a different way. So you could have a student who participated in tutoring and received a stipend, participated in another course in tutoring but didn't receive a stipend, and then for another course didn't participate in tutoring at all. And there could be some combination of that across students. So the analysis was not problematic at the level of the course in terms of how to complete the analysis, because we could essentially split each person into each of those courses. But when thinking about retention, now that becomes slightly problematic, because now we're completing the analysis essentially at the level of the institution. Is the person actually coming back to the institution? So we had to reconceptualize the conditions slightly. And in this case, we created 3 different conditions. The first is, did they experience tutoring and receive the stipend? Did they experience tutoring but did not receive a stipend? Or did they not participate in tutoring? So in this situation, that first student would be categorized and experience tutoring and receive a stipend. Even though with 2 other courses, they didn't receive a stipend, at some point they experienced receiving a stipend for attending tutoring. And in a similar vein, the next student was categorized as experiencing tutoring but did not receive a stipend. And then, of course, that last student would be categorized as not participating. So with that as the conceptual framework, let me share what the findings actually revealed. So in regards to impact on retention, whether students receive a stipend or not, retention rates were at about an 80% level. And what was interesting is that when they did not participate in tutoring, retention was at 57%. So again, let me turn things back over to Dr. Kuti.
Thank you. So we're talking about all these numbers and what does it actually mean? What does evaluation mean? What does tutoring, what does the result? Well, as we said earlier on, if you participate in tutoring at a sustained level, you're more likely to succeed. And success in this case, and when we're talking about retention in this particular course, in this particular program, we're talking about students coming back to school following semester. So there's a technical definition of freshman. I don't want to bore you guys that are not in higher education about what retention is. But in any case, in this case, we're talking about if a student came to Central State in the fall, did they come back in the spring? And if they came in the spring, did they come back in the fall? That's what we mean by retention. So what we showed is that students that received sustained tutoring came back to school. Now, when you come back to school with an A, a B, and a C, you have a better attitude about school. You're a better student. And what we find is that the more better students there are, the better the academic environment for the whole school. Meaning students are more engaged in scholarly activities, students go to the library, students participate in social things. So more serious students, more successful students create an improved academic environment for the whole campus. The more studious students are, the more likely they are to graduate on time. So, as you may or may not know, most students don't graduate in 4 years. Typically, we measure graduation rate on a 6 year basis. But when students perform better, they graduate in 4 years, and so the graduation rate is increased. Now, that's good for the student because if you graduate on time, you don't have loans, you get your scholarship, and you're done in a timely fashion. But it's also good for the institution, i.e., universities receive federal financial aid. That is based if your student loan repayment is above a certain percentage, you lose the ability to give financial aid. The state of Ohio, because Central State is a public school, also reimburses the university based on student completion and success. So if a student from Ohio graduates, Central State gets $20,000 per student that graduate. So if we had 10 students that started and two of them graduate, that's $40,000. But if we're able to get several students to graduate, that's $140,000 to the university. So there's actually concrete financial benefits. And also, for non-out-of-state students, get $3,000. Now, how does this affect students? The more financially stable Central State is, the more services and support we can offer every student. So this is how you go from students participating in tutoring and getting good grades to actually enhancing the student themselves and their own and enhancing the institution as well. And
And those
also,
are,
right,
my apologies, go ahead.
no, and one thing I also wanted to mention is that Central State, we 80% of our students are low income, which means they receive federal financial aid. So if students are able to graduate on time, and remember, as I said, the most important predictor of a person's success is whether you have a bachelor's degree. So if you're low income first generation and you get a bachelor's degree, you're going to earn twice as much money as a high school dropout. So that improves your own socio-economic status, your family, and also improves society as well. Because the higher degree, the more educated a person is, the more they earn and the more they contribute to society. So
And,
go ahead.
and just to loop back to the question that was asked before about the cost of tutoring and what you shared, I guess I'm asking like how to put kind of like a kind of a bow on that in terms from your perspective of the cost of tutoring relative to the kind of the outcomes and the other financial benefits that you highlighted.
So, I was thinking about that. This is why, not because I work in higher education, but education is the best investment that individuals and society can make. Because when you invest in people and they get educated, they're more likely to make more informed choices, which is good for all of society. So when we talk about the cost of tutoring, so we offer students incentives of $100 or $200. Small change, but for students could be useful at the end of the semester. So what that does is when we talk about the cost of tutoring and we give incentives, the benefit at the end for the students personally and for society as a whole, as far as how much we're putting in the program, is yields a significant investment beyond the actual dollars we're talking about. It actually helps the university fulfill its mission. And our mission is to transform students' lives but through a nurturing environment by making them more productive members of society.
Good. Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you also for the individual who asked that question. Why don't we pause here for a moment to see if there are any other questions?
We do have a few questions. One is, how is the institution considering sustaining aspects of the project, specifically the tutoring?
It's a good question. I did not plan that question. So one of the things that we're trying to prove at the end of the 3 year of the, remember, this is a 3 year funded project by the federal government. We're also working with a couple of other departments on campus that have tutoring. And as I was talking about COVID earlier, because of COVID, we've had to convert all of our tutoring to online. And we're working with other departments on campus. And what we hope to demonstrate to the university is the benefits of tutoring, how it impacts the students' grade, and how it improves retention, and hopefully that the university can invest resources to make it a university-wide activity that all students receive tutoring at one level or the other.
Very, very good. Is there one more question?
There is. Was the evidence that the incentive needed to be consistently offered, whether that's every semester or class, or did the benefits of success in class eventually replace the need to receive a stipend in future semesters?
Well, we're still giving, it's a 3 year program and we're still giving incentives. And so our goal is to give incentives until the program ends. But I will say this, although we're offering financial incentive, we found that the greatest incentive is the grades for the students and the faculty involvement. That is actually what drives students, is what are my grades at the end of the semester. They don't turn the money down, but it's the grades that they really want.
And just to add on to that very quickly, as we were working on this webinar, it dawned on me a potential approach, because I think for a while, I think I was of the mind that that was difficult to measure, but it started to dawn on me how we could approach to be able to measure, to tease that apart a bit more, and just to be able to gather evidence of what Dr. Cooley was sharing that's been observed anecdotally. So stay tuned on that one. We have just a couple of more minutes left, so let me just real quickly, one, just share from my perspective what I thought the value of evaluation in this continuous improvement process was. One, I think it's just very fulfilling to be able to witness evaluation in action and to be able to see how it informed the decision-making process. Again, this is something that I often talk about, so it's really, it would often just make my day to be able to talk to Dr. Cooley and the team and hear about how they're actually using the evaluation findings. And then the other piece I was really appreciative of was the willingness of the project team to implement the data systems to be able to collect the data, because as you can imagine, there's additional amount of work that goes into being able to make sure that you're gathering the right data and that the data are clean. So some of the things that I really appreciated from my perspective. Dr. Cooley, would you like to share your perspectives?
Yeah, so what I will say is that, when I first got in this business, people talk about evaluation and assessment. Now I really know what they mean, is that you have to evaluate as you work on something. When they talk about process evaluation, is that as you're implementing the program, we're looking at the data that is being generated to improve what you're doing. Because of evaluation, we had to change the tutoring hours, because students said, because there were also some qualitative evaluation, meaning Dr. Rocks and our group spoke to students. We did a survey of students. So students were able to express that they want tutoring at a certain time, at a certain place. They wanted different kinds of tutors, and also were able to increase incentives. And I almost forgot to mention my program manager, Dr. Bernadette Hens. We went to her and told her about some of the things that was going on in our program. and she gave us the flexibility to increase incentives. And that was because of the evaluation. And finally, it's the summative evaluation, because we're able to show the grades and what students were earning. It let us know what was working in the program and what was not working in the program. And we were able to demonstrate the effectiveness of tutoring to students and faculty and to our funding agency.
And I should also, you were remembering to give credit to the program officer, and I should also just note that Dr. Julia Sworka is the lead evaluator on this project as well, and worked very closely with you and the team.
Yes, she knows us very well.
Yeah. So just real quickly here in closing, if anyone has any questions or needs any additional information, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Cootie. His contact information is here. And also, we're very impressed that you were able to connect with Betsy DeVos, the former Secretary of Education, as you can see in this picture. So really catching the eye in terms of really important individuals of the project. And so please feel free to reach out with Dr. Cootie on that. And then also, finally, you should be receiving an email in the next day or two with a recording as well as a survey. So please provide any feedback that you may have about this webinar, and as well as additional topics. And then also feel free to forward the webinar recording on too. And then mark your calendars for our next coffee break webinar on April 22nd, which will talk about annual reporting. So thank you to all who've participated, and thank you, Dr. Cootie, for being our first guest presenter on our coffee break webinar.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm glad, because of this is not the first time we've worked with Dr. Rocks. Our relationship goes back 10 years, because we're together. So we're just very happy that you've provided us your professional service that have improved the project and help us to deliver, which the whole point of the program is to increase student success and hopefully help them to succeed and graduate and improve their lives, which is what this is all about. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I know that the team appreciates that as well.
All right.
Everyone have a great rest of the day.
Peace.